The Revolution Podcast, episode 26. Feedback for The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia.
Hi, you're listening to Revolution Podcast. This is Maria Howell as Grace on Revolution.
Golden Spiral Media presents The Revolution Podcast. Instantly watch unlimited TV episodes and movies over the internet right on your TV, computer, and various mobile devices. Watch as much as you want, as often as you want, for only $7.99 a month. Visit goldenspiralmedia.com/Netflix and start your free trial today. Welcome back to the Revolution Podcast, everybody. I'm Daryl.
And I'm Jeremy.
And I did that in one take.
Huzzah!
I'm getting better. Seriously. And all the hotkeys that weren't working just a few minutes ago. I know this is on Thursday for those of you listening, but we recorded back to back with the other, and I don't know. I'm not complaining because they're now working. Even though the hotkeys weren't working for sound clips in the first podcast. And I didn't do anything different. I didn't restart the program. But anyway. Hopefully that means we'll be better too this episode. Jeremy, you doing all right?
Yes, refreshed my cup of coffee and looked at a map of Georgia. And I'm good to go.
Found out where Savannah is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And geographically, I didn't know exactly where it was on the coastline. And I'm kind of wondering where they entered into the Georgia Federation. I need to look at that map.
Well,
is it in the top part of top part of Georgia, or does it actually begin somewhere in the Carolinas?
I mean, the border between...
Right.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because they got there like that.
I know.
It didn't take them long
Well, they were already in Virginia last episode. So I don't know how far those are.
Right. Well, Virginia, you go through North Carolina, South Carolina, just to get to Georgia.
Okay.
And they probably took the road or something similar, which would have been like 85, I guess. Interstate 85. But... I don't know.
Hey, they don't have any trouble traveling across country in just half a day.
This had to take them at least, I don't know, I'm going to say a month since the last episode. So
yeah, I don't know. And we don't know how far Rachel and Aaron got. We don't know where Jane lived, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I'd be curious to find out, but I don't
But something we didn't bring up, we do know the tower's in Colorado.
That's right. That's true. We did get that. We didn't bring that up in the last episode.
So...
Well, we've got some great feedback this week. Last episode that we did over The Song Remains the Same, we had some great feedback that came in, but as far as the volume of feedback that we got in, it was probably the lowest we've ever received. Man, you guys made up for it this week. We have a ton of feedback to get in, so we're going to get started right now. Have I ever mentioned that I really enjoy that music?
I was going to preempt you and take your quote there. I really like it too.
You got to be fast.
It's the one I bob my head to. So I know. I don't know.
Yep,
it's good.
It's good stuff.
It's got a good beat.
Yep. All right, let's get things started this week with some audio. Now, the first three that we're going to play came in about the last episode. The Song Remains the Same. Okay, so here's the first one. This comes in from Patty.
Hi, this is Patty from Cincinnati. Patty Be Right on Twitter. I just watched The Song Remains the Same, and I noticed there's a very clear winner in the episode. It's Aaron. He gets to go on a cross-country hike, I guess, with his idol, and the two smartest people in the world. And when the revolution's over and they start building the United States again, I think those two will be in the brain trust, and that would be very exciting. But that's just something I noticed. Aaron's the winner, and that's it. See you later. Bye.
Winner, chicken dinner. That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah, she's thinking way out, far ahead, which I love. I mean, at the end of the day, when some sort of civilization comes back, and if the United States comes back together, or let's say there's a worldwide brain trust. Here's what she calls it.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good idea there, Patty.
The only problem I have with that is Rachel doesn't think she's going to survive. And if Rachel doesn't survive, Fatty's not going to survive. Is that what they call him?
No, they called him Chubby.
Chubby. I'm sorry. Chubby's not going to survive.
Yeah.
So, Chubby Gentleman. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he'll have a convenient escape. But I like her theory that he'll be in the brain trust, and I think Rachel will survive. But according to them, I think it's a suicide mission. So I don't think Aaron really considers himself a super winner at the moment. But,
He definitely doesn't.
but if you're thinking out towards ultimate victory, I think Patty has it right.
Well, we know just because, come on, it's a TV show. They're going to survive. They're going to make it to the tower. After that, who knows? But they're safe for now.
Yeah.
We know that. Of course they don't, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Tony, who's got some pretty interesting thoughts and complaints about the show.
Hello, Daryl and Jeremy. This is Tony from Michigan with some feedback for the Revolution podcast. Guys, I want so much to like this show, and it keeps putting me in a bad mood. They keep doing such dumb things with the writing, and I want so much to like this. But I'm going to vent. The first scene, which I sort of liked, the scene between Neville and Randall Flynn, where they're vying for who's going to be the guy for Monroe. But how does Flynn have everybody's report cards? Did Monroe actually give the guy everyone's personnel reports? Has Randall Flynn gone through everyone's mission reports and decided who's qualified and who's not? Has Monroe really given him that information? That seems insane. And then a little bit later, just decision-making, you question. Who in the writing, they've captured one of the top guys in the Monroe militia. They've got one big burly guy guarding him by himself. And we truly believe, A, that's the decision they make, and B, the big burly guy gets beaten up by Elizabeth Mitchell with a lunch tray. I don't buy it. Sorry. The ridiculousness of that takes me right out of the story. So Tom Neville gets away. How quickly does he get back home? Does he just run? He doesn't have a truck anymore. I don't know. Again, the logistics, the timeline doesn't make sense. And then the end of the episode, why, seriously, why are people abandoning each other? We've just brought in Ninja Librarian. Let him and Nora lead a team to save the nuke. Why don't you let Miles, the most competent guy around, work with Rachel and Aaron and Charlie and lead a whole bunch of soldiers to, save the world at the tower? Instead, for a completely false, absolutely contrived reason, we're splitting people up again. The writing is driving me crazy, and I want so much to like the show because there's so many cool elements to it. You guys, I don't know what to do. I'm turning to you for advice. What do I do? Love your podcast. Thank you. Bye.
Well, I will tell you what not to do. Do not watch Once Upon a Time.
I have never seen it.
This is bad.
I heard you graph about the writing of that show.
But
so
I
what should
still
you
watch
do?
it.
What's your advice for Tony?
Wow, I don't have any real practical advice because he's right. Everything he said, I think we may have minorly kind of harped on, but yeah, he talks about the guard, how Tom gets away, how quickly he travels. This week, he's really going to be upset about what we just talked about, getting to Atlanta.
How quickly did they get there?
So the only thing that I can say is we've talked about it, suspend disbelief. I mean, we don't know the timeline. We can assume that there is time that goes between it. Heck, this episode begins the way I have it in my head is at least a month after the last one. They've had to have time to travel through 2 states, hundreds of miles, and they're not. Well, they might be force marching, but they're not going to be walking that far a day. So it's going to take them several weeks to get there. And Tom, to me, has the same amount of time that they get to Atlanta to get in, get out. And then we see Neville, or we see Monroe finding out at the beginning of this, Tom's left. So he would find out pretty quickly if that was the case. I don't think it would take him all of that time. So what I'm assuming is Tom just left, so it took him that long, and they just left a couple days ago maybe. So and that's my explanation about suspending that disbelief.
Yeah, I
just let
think
the
it's
time
just
go.
more of an issue with TV in general. Look, Tony, we know you from Fringe, and you know that Fringe was terrible about this too. They could go from New York to Boston,
Yeah.
Twice a day, and have lunch and dinner, and it was just there was no consistency on how long it took to get from New York to Boston. So it's just a TV thing. For the sake of telling the story, they've got to move things along,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly you're here or there. So while it does bug me, it bugged me on Fringe. It's not one of those things that makes me go, I can't watch this show anymore. There's some other things, and you're right. The guy getting knocked out with the cafeteria tray. But again, it's one of those TV things, right? I mean, you could hit somebody with whatever it is, and they're going to be knocked unconscious for as long as you
Mhm.
need them to be. That's something that's just
Yeah.
rampant in TV.
I
It has
think-
always been
yeah,
that way.
I think somewhere somebody needs to use like a teddy bear and knock somebody out with it just to
Yeah.
prove that.
Yeah.
That would be good.
So my advice would be just to focus on. You said this show has a lot of great elements to it, and it does. These other things that you're mentioning, I think, are more just faults with TV. It is what
Yeah.
it is, right? I mean, but there's also some great things about the show. So focus on the positive. Be a glass half full kind of guy, and join us for the ride. Just focus on that stuff, and then you'll be much happier. Don't look over here. Look over here. That's my advice.
Yeah. That's very good advice.
Hey, we'll take it.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for writing in. We appreciate it so much. Patty, I don't know if I thanked you when we were addressing your call, but thank you so much as well. Let's move on to Travis.
Hey, Jeremy and Daryl, or rather, Daryl and Jeremy. Hey guys, it's Travis in Florida, or maybe I should say the Georgia Republic. Since I've got the cable, thanks a lot, Clinton Daryl, I can't get to the show until you were already recording the podcast. But you said we could send in any time, so I am. I asked if we knew what procedure Danny had, and according to Daryl, we don't. I've heard that the medical field is developing nanotech to replicate or rather clone missing appendages such as an ear or a nose. I did a bit of research to find out the question of how they replicate and found just a blurb of harvesting whatever material is around. I suppose that would hold true for organic or metallic substances. So I hope that answers Jeremy's question. But this led me to believe that whatever healed Danny may be nanotech. If so, the blue things inside him may be the power source or CPU type device, if you will, instructing him, or rather his nanites, what to do. I would assume Danny's nanites are different from the blackout nannies, but even so, Rachel may be using that device to figure out how to reprogram or rather turn off the nanites causing the blackout. I can't believe no one but Jeremy thought of that. Well, that's all I had, so long, and God bless America.
All right. Before you say anything,
Okay.
I want to remind the listeners of what I said to begin the feedback portion. We have 3 of these that came in a week, actually 2 weeks ago, because we didn't have an episode last
Right.
week. Did he just not
He nailed
predict
it.
what just happened in this
Yeah.
week's episode?
Well played.
Travis, kudos to you, man. Kudos to you. Either you got a pirated copy of this week's episode, you time traveled, which Jeremy would love,
Heck yeah.
or you just, looked into your crystal ball and predicted what I believe we learned in this week's episode.
We need more feedback. MOAR. Feedback from Travis.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Very good. So, did you want to address anything else in the?
Well, I think you copied him with your theory earlier. So.
my what now?
Were you cheating with the whole blue thing powering the nanites?
No.
Okay.
I put in all of my notes before I listened to any feedback.
All right.
Yep, I did. And although that did come in last week, but
Right. He
2 weeks
was
ago,
ahead of
I've
you.
forgotten. I've slept so many times since I've forgotten. No, I'll give him credit though. I mean, he's amazing that he came up with
Yeah.
that. So kudos to you, Travis. All right, let's move on to some feedback that we got in for this week's episode. Starting off with Barb.
Hello, Daryl and Jeremy. This is Barb, aka Tangier14, calling in this week from the Georgia Federation, instead of the Great Wasteland where she usually is. How appropriate. I really enjoyed the episode last night, although I thought that it was more of a kind of a setup episode to drive some future things that we're going to learn as opposed to sort of a standalone big action like we had last week. One of the key things, of course, was Miles and his relationship issues. And I think that at this point in the series, we pretty much get that Miles has relationship issues, and I hope that they will explore instead why does he have them and what has led him to be the way that he is, to pretty much throw away everyone around him, because I think that we still don't understand that yet. I think another interesting thing that we saw last night was the good doctor who turned those two bad guys into crispy critters a la Fringe. And I think that there are more to those little nanites than meet the eye, because here again we had someone, her significant other, who had stage 4 cancer and was completely cured. So I think that there is going to be a lot more about those nanites in the power as we go along. And I don't think I want her sandwiches, and I'm glad she didn't serve it with milk either. AK lost. All right, signing out. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
All right, good stuff. You know, I like that she brought up about Miles and his relationship issues. That's putting it mildly. I mean, he's like I mentioned in the last podcast, he's got a whole trail of destruction behind him. And I hope it does point to a bigger picture of like, okay, let me ask you this. Would you like to see a flashback of why Miles has, I was going to say trust issues. I don't even think that that's it. You know, why does he seem to leave this wake of destruction behind him? Would you like to see something that delved into what makes him that way?
Well, of course.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd necessarily need a flashback, but somebody slapping him for...
I'm thinking if it stems from some sort of childhood event or something like that, it might be cool to but either way, something, we've got to get something on why so many people are being left in his wake.
Maybe Ben was always the favorite and Miles is, I don't know.
Maybe.
Upset.
Maybe he was abused. Maybe, I don't know. But I like that you mentioned it, Barb, because otherwise it's going to be this issue of the week, right?
Right.
When we need a plot device, we bring in somebody who Miles has scorned.
Right. We need character development, and what we get now is the same character. He's pretty flat at the moment.
There you go.
He's just the same guy who screwed somebody, essentially. I guess in both sense of the words. So, I mean, he's leaving a wake of people just, destroyed or upset or mad. I mean, there's something that he's done to a lot of people, and I hope that's not a plot point that they're just using because they can. What I'm hoping it is they're really trying to drive home who he is, because when something happens, we will know why.
Yeah.
So which probably will. I mean, I just rewatched Battlestar, and I'm rewatching the rewatch because my wife loved it so much. And you see all of the little details, and maybe kind of one thing that we don't see here is why these things are happening, because they're actually telling us the answers to later. So who knows?
Yeah, I hope so. All right, well, let's move on. Barb, thanks for calling that in. We certainly appreciate it.
And I'm going to steal part of hers later. So.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything more to say on that?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, let's move on to Chip.
Hey, Jeremy. Hey, Daryl. This is your old buddy, Daryl's old buddy, Jeremy. I hope I'll be your new buddy, Chip from sunny Pine Knoll Shores, North Carolina, calling the Revolution podcast. And I must say, I have been remiss in not calling in, and so I am digging Revolution. Obviously, it's not Fringe, and nothing ever will be. But there is a lot of good stuff going on in Revolution, and I like it. I just think we need to keep working on character development. So, given that, I think since the hiatus, they have come back, and they're doing a lot better with character development. I want to see more of that. Also, I have a few observations. I think that our girl is doing much, much better. Charlie has really kind of stopped being the whiny kid, and she's becoming kind of a little bad watermelon out there, and kind of reminded me a little of Katniss Everdeen, I think, those of you who are following along with those stories. Secondly, is Miles her dad? I'm thinking yes. Good theory. I like it. I like it a lot. Also, I think that Mr. Monroe, I think he needs to live. I think it's the Monroe Republic or the Monroe Empire, or whatever you want to call it, for a reason. Tom definitely must live. He's the most interesting character on the show, and especially if Monroe dies, as Jeremy is convinced. Tom needs to live. He and the wife. Going to be interesting watching what happens with those two as they run and run and run. You think they'll hook up with the revolutionaries? Who knows? Elizabeth Mitchell's character, still not really sold on her. I don't know that they're using her to her fullest acting extent. She's kind of one note, and I want to see more development out of her because she's a terrific actress and can bring a lot to this show. I know that's why they got her there. And then finally, poor Aaron. Gosh, you just want to shake him up a little bit, get with the program. I guess he's supposed to be our Hurley character. We maybe identify with him somewhat. They need to spend more time developing that character, and let's see if this actor's got the chops. I think he will if they give him more to do. And I'll just wrap up quickly saying that I'm really glad that Golden Spiral Media is still out there, still doing their thing, and I'm really glad that Jeremy joined Daryl on this. I think you guys have great chemistry, and we're going to have a lot of fun, hopefully for several years of Revolution. That's all I got from sunny North Carolina. And if you get a chance and you're interested in beer, check out an all-new podcast that has been set up through the extraordinary efforts of our friends at Golden Spiral Media. It's called Tales from the Cask. Yours truly is on it with some of my friends who love beer. That's all I got. Shameless plug over. And remember, the revolution will not be televised unless it's on NBC. See you guys later.
All right.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet Chip when he was here in Oklahoma City for the Fringe finale party?
I probably ran into him, but I don't think I met him to the point that I met him.
Yeah.
So
great dude. He's obviously been a contributor. For those of you who've been listening to the Fringe podcast, you'll recognize Chip. Mm-hmm. He had a lot of great points. He really broke down several of the characters and talked about their development. He talked about Charlie's development now, and he compared her to Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games. Mm-hmm. And obviously with her crossbow, she's been getting a lot of Hunger Games comparisons since day one. I'm not real familiar. Actually, I'm not familiar at all with the character of Katniss, so I couldn't tell you how they compare. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've read the books or seen the movies.
No, I've avoided them because they're too similar to a certain series that I'm writing. So
okay,
I'm trying to avoid any influence there.
Yeah. But, I agree that Charlie has grown. And I think this episode was an example of that. Now, she didn't have to kill anybody, but she went up to that door prepared to slit somebody's throat. And earlier in the season, think about early on when they faced the bounty hunter going into Chicago. And she got on to Miles for wanting to kill the guy. Yeah. She's changed a lot. She's grown up a lot. She's learned a lot. Character has definitely developed.
Yeah, she's a lot darker now, and I like that. And he talks about the character development. I like having somebody else that's interested in that. And he talks about Rachel being kind of a one-note character, and I think we've seen that. So I'm kind of ready for Rachel to grow up too.
We keep saying we don't trust her. There's something not quite there that we can put our finger on. Man, let's get something there so we can start figuring her out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm totally with you on that as well, Chip.
And he talks about the Monroe Republic being the Monroe Republic, and Monroe has to live. And while I agree with that, man, I don't want it to be I'm really rooting for Monroe to just bite it, but he's got a definite point with that, and that's kind of why my one hang up I don't necessarily talk about, but it is called the Monroe Republic. There's a scene in Battlestar, and it's spoiler, where you always think it's gonna get blown up, but how quickly can they kill it? They can't destroy the Battlestar Galactica in the first or second season because it's called Battlestar Galactica. So because it has that name, you assume that, it can't all hit the fan right now. Something has to give. But at the same time, I think he's expendable.
I do too.
So,
like I mentioned in the last podcast, I'm not hoping for that. I love David and what he's doing with his character. It just seems like he's going to be, something's going to break with that character, right?
Right. Now, I'm rooting for Monroe to die, not necessarily the actor to leave the show. So.
I'll say too that what we got from the preview, it looks like, because he talked about Aaron, kind of also what's going on with him.
Right.
It looks like we're going to get a little bit more with Aaron next week. I won't say anything further, but from the preview, it definitely looks that way. Mm-hmm. He also mentioned his podcast. You guys should check it out. Chip and Jennifer and Tony are doing the podcast called Tales from the Cask. It's in iTunes. They've got one episode in there right now. They'll have 2 by the end of the week. The third one's already been recorded. I just have to produce it. So they're doing a great job. I'm not a drinker, but I am thoroughly enjoying their podcast, and they're so knowledgeable and friendly. And so go check them out, especially if you're into like home brews, craft brews, and unique things like that. You'll definitely enjoy it. I'm wholeheartedly endorse their podcast because, like I said, even if you're not a drinker, I think you'll enjoy it. So Tales from the Cask is the name of it.
All
right, Chip, thanks for calling in. Let's read a couple, Jeremy.
That sounds like a plan.
I'll take the first one. You've taken the long one the last couple of times. I feel bad you doing that every time. This comes in from Emily, a.k.a. Foamy Once. She says, "Hi, Daryl and Jeremy. I found your podcast over the winter hiatus, and I'm really enjoying being able to watch and listen along. Here are my thoughts on the night the lights went out in Georgia. Ironically, the lights went out last night in Minnesota, too. However, our outage was due to a snowstorm, not the threat of a nuclear bomb. So I think I still got the sweeter end of the deal. Great episode. I really enjoyed the change of pace, taking a break from the rebels and getting a peek at how the rest of the nation is operating without power. The endless supply of ghosts from miles past gives us more than enough narrative to put this story into context. My narrow perspective of the Monroe Republic was blown wide open, which I really appreciated. The parallel between mechanical power and authoritative power was brought to the forefront and really draws out the big question of Monroe's ambitions. President Foster refers to their rivals as Third World. She dismisses the advantage of mechanical power that Monroe has acquired and instead points to the sustenance of the Georgia Federation. Warm weather and a society which fosters innovation and community seems to be the key to long-term survival in a world without power, and I would certainly choose it over a territory which forces me into obedience through constant fear for my life. It puts the end game into perspective, too. Too often, when a people is governed solely by militaristic strength instead of foundational principles, they merely survive under the thumb of those who desire total authority and dominion. Disobedience is dealt with swiftly. But when a people who is led by individuals who encourages life, loyalty... But when a people is led by individuals who encourage life, loyalty comes without the undercurrent of self-preservation because there is a cause worth fighting for. We have only seen a narrow scope of how Georgia is governed, but I like what I see so far. Besides, what does Monroe want, really? Miles says he wants real estate, and this is probably very true, but to what end? If Monroe thinks he can sweep across the nation, conquer the land and all the people, and then expect to reign over them like a king as they work away in the fields and produce for him, he is seriously deluded. I can't see Monroe's plans playing out in favor of a new world where people are just allowed to live and work. The way he is leading the Monroe militia will produce a constant state of oppression. Hey, there's that word you used earlier. So for that, I really hope that an alliance between the rebels and the Georgia Federation brings about the disintegration of the Monroe Republic. Let the people live long and prosper. Thanks for all your hard work, gents, and remember, always kill him when you have the chance. That comes in from Emily, a.k.a. Foamy Once.
I like that. All I have to say is nailed it.
Yeah.
So if you listen to that, then I think you pretty much have a great point. If you didn't, you need to go back and listen to it because Foamy Once was right on right there. She talks about how her narrow perspective of the Monroe Republic was blown wide open. I totally agree. I mean, when you see what the world could be, it's why would you want to live under this fake ruler? I mean, he's a lot like the Goa'uld in Stargate. You don't want to live under that. They're tyrannical. They're not worth serving. And in this world, I think she's definitely right. If he got quote unquote control, there's no way these people would follow him.
No way.
And I mean, she's definitely right on that. And I can't really add anything to her because I'm more or less repeating it because she's spot on. So
Yeah, she's fantastic. She called in regularly for the Fringe podcast. And I say called in or sent in. Emily, I love reading your stuff, but you do a much better job of it than me. You should call in from now on. But she's great. She does a great job.
Yeah.
All right, you want to take the next one?
All right. Let's see. Hey, Daryl and Jeremy. This is Princess, a.k.a. Princess Taylor, coming to you from the deserted desert of Arizona, or as we like to call it, Terra Nemo, America. Just wanted to send a few thoughts on the bits of knowledge, non-knowledge, in this week's episode of Revolution. Kudos to Rachel for owning that. If she had it to do all over again, she'd sacrifice her son's life to save everyone else from their current life/death status, even in the face of selfish Jane's plant biochemical laser? Apparently these nanites now have a secret sub-command, fend off health problems. They saved Danny's life, but still left him with pesky little asthma problem, and Jane's significant other is surviving cancer thanks to them. Maybe we all should have one inside us, just in case. And what already? What did Miles do to these women? Rachel, Kelly, Nora? Who else? I'm almost afraid to know at the same time because I don't want to start rooting against Miles. Although getting more insight into Neville, even through all the things he did, made him a more interesting character for me. So why not Miles too? That's all from me for now. Stoically surviving at the bottom of the wastelands, Princess. What do you think, Daryl?
Well, she took the opposite approach that we did to Rachel, saying that, Rachel really has come around. And I think there's no way of knowing for sure, and just Rachel's going to have to prove it to me that she's still not only after her own agenda.
Right.
She's always seemed to have her own agenda. Whatever suits her best at any given moment is what she's going to choose. But I think that was the theme of this episode. So, maybe she has turned over a new leaf. I just don't think we can know that for sure. But, if you believe that she has, I have no problem with that. I think that maybe this is the start of a new thing for her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before the show launched, I predicted that she was Darth Vader. So I'm really skeptical of Rachel. And it's looking like they're trying to disprove that. But like you, I'm having a hard time trusting her and trusting that she's actually selfless. So, but yeah, she still did own up to it, whether or not that was sincere or not leaves a little question. Danny's life being saved but having asthma is definitely a concern for me as well. It's not something I mentioned before, but why didn't it cure that too?
Sure.
We'll probably see. I'd be really interested to see if Beth has some other health problem that maybe is a side effect of the nanites. And so maybe asthma was a side effect of that in Danny. So.
I think that's one option. I think another option is the nanites. I mean, asthma is not life-threatening. I mean, in most cases. I mean, it can.
If it's controlled, it's okay.
Be, right? But whatever he had was probably, seems definitely to have been life-threatening. So maybe the nanites, if they are specifically programmed to target one thing, in Beth's case, cancer, and Danny's case,
something
unknown.
Else. Right.
That could be why it was helping him with that, but not the asthma.
That's fair enough. So it doesn't necessarily cure every ailment.
Right.
It just cures its designed ailment.
Right. I mean, it didn't take away his allergy to lead.
Fair enough. Or should I say touche?
Yeah. All right, let's move on back to the audios with Corey in Australia. And Corey, let me just say before we get started, I really appreciate that every week you call in, and I always have something to smile at. He comes up with something witty to start out every week. This week is no different. It always brings a smile to my face. Here's Corey.
Hey Daryl, Jeremy, Corey from Australia. So I've converted my iPad to Steam Power so I could record some feedback for the new episode of Revolution. So pack your crap, because we're going to Georgia. This show is really just starting to go from strength to strength. This episode was so good. We got so much. Starting with, seeing Georgia. A very stark contrast to the Monroe Republic in that they have a president, and what I'm assuming is probably an elected president rather than a dictator like Monroe. Seeing that Georgia has a lot of money and trades with Europe is very, very interesting that things are going on. So they are aware of what is happening in the world, on a global scale, what's happening in other countries. So that was really, really cool. Monroe attempting to use a nuclear weapon, trying to use fear tactics by having the helicopters go over and dropping flies and things like that, ultimately failing because Miles saves the day, so he's getting a real redemption thing. It does end with him being offered a position to lead men into war. So, it's, a kind of a conflict for him there. Very, very cool. And on the side, we had Rachel getting more information on the tower. And in doing so, we get a bit more information on what the nanites do. Well, furthermore, what they do. We know that they cut the power, but now we know that they were doing more in medical fields, curing cancer, things like that. So that also was really, really cool. All in all, this episode was solid 8 out of 10 for me. So, I will catch you guys later. Cheers.
All right. Jeremy, what'd you think?
Well, we've talked about it, but he talks about how strong this show is and how it's continuing. I like that. He also mentions the contrast that we see, and we've discussed that. But he mentions the president, and I hadn't even thought she was elected.
I hadn't either. I guess because we know that Monroe wasn't.
Right. So to me, I just assumed it, and I think that's very interesting. It's some great insight into Georgia even more. We see maybe they actually have some democracy there,
maybe they
or
do.
Something. So
it would certainly fit in with what we saw.
Right. So.
It's such a good thing. I mean, Emily mentioned that her mind was blown with the difference here because, look, we're like Charlie in this situation. We just left the Monroe Republic for the first time.
Right.
It's all we've ever known. And there's this whole other world out there when the way people are living and the lifestyle, the things they have in their lives are different. The word is, I don't know why I can't think of the word, but it's just completely different.
Yeah.
And what it does not only shows how the people live different, but it's as we're seeing over and over again with these feedbacks, and we'll see more of them still. It really puts a big contrast on Monroe and his, ruling style.
Yeah.
It's not that way everywhere else.
And we've made fun of the Hobbit moment with them leaving the Shire or leaving Monroe Republic. And I think that, kind of thinking about it, I think they intentionally show us that so we can see. It helps make that divide. It helps that contrast because it's like right after that scene, there's the bus and everything. So it's really neat to see just how stark the world really is. So I won't go into that again though. See, 8 of 10, which is what I gave it. So I'm gonna have to say that he's got a good number system.
All right. All right, let's move on. Corey, thank you for calling in. We appreciate it.
Unless it's metric.
It might be in Australia. Let's go down to Jim.
Hey, Daryl and Jeremy. Jim in Wisconsin with my feedback on the night the lights went out in Georgia. For me, this was a great follow-up to The Song Remains the Same, so I'm going to give it 9 magically melted militiamen out of 10. What I really liked about the episode was how easy it was to follow. There were only 2 main plot directions to go with, and the writers worked in loads of great action, information, and backstory. There were more hints to Miles' past, some new developments with the nanites, and even a little bit of character growth. We also got a nice, short, complete story between Alec and Miles. Once again, the flashbacks were used to show us what the characters were thinking, and I like how they filled in the story between the two and gave us food for thought about Miles down the line. I really enjoyed watching Monroe take one more step to complete insanity this week. Killing that poor captain purely out of his betrayal paranoia all but cemented him as the engineer of his own personal crazy train. All he needs now is a creepy grin when he insults people, kind of like Randall. Tom's desertion has given the general much to think about, as it seems fewer and fewer men can be trusted in the mighty militia. Speaking of Tom, it looks like he and Julia got out of Dodge without being spotted. I wonder if they had help, or if they just slipped out in the middle of the night. I like how Mr. Neville was also completely absent this week, so we can start to forget about him a little bit. I'm guessing he's going to turn back up at just the right time, though, to help out Team Miles. He'll probably save someone from being killed as a cliffhanger to another episode. I can see it already. Miles is about to be run through when a shot rings out that kills his attacker. We see the smoking Desert Eagle in the bushes, and then the focus shifts to Tom holding onto it. Boom, fade to black. Even though I thought he was past it, Tom has to get some level of redemption. Heck, Miles did. As for Miles, his past keeps coming up over and over. Once again, he's forced to handle a situation that he's partially responsible for with Alec. Also, things he did as General Matheson are coming back to bite him. I wonder what he did to Madam President that had her ready to use the letter opener on him. Was it something of a romantic nature? Or did he kill her son or maybe husband during his attacks? Alec also alludes to what Miles did to Rachel, only to die before he can tell the rest of us. At least Charlie knows now to keep asking, and I'm looking forward to when Miles finally has to tell her. Rachel and Aaron stopped to see Dr. Warren and almost got into some big trouble. Jane seems to be another one of those lost eggheads with more information than she knows what to do with. In fact, she isn't remotely afraid of Randall and can even control the nanites to some degree. It also sounded like Dr. Warren came up with the nanites. Rachel says, not even your machines could fix what was done to Danny. It's too bad they ended up leaving her behind, but at least they have the nanite handbook now. Finally, it looks like the battle is about to be taken to Monroe. With a couple hundred extra men and a few more weapons, Miles may finally have what he needs to deal a serious blow to the militia. I can't help but be worried that Randall has something ready for just such an invasion, though, and that Georgia might be surprised by something when it launches its attack. Overall, I like where the story is going, and I'm looking forward to next week. I can't wait to see what happens at the tower either. Looking forward to listening to all the great other feedback from the corner of Shut Up and Stay Here, Jim in Wisconsin.
Oh man, where do you get started here?
Well, first I will say that he is correct with his pronunciation of cement. So
that's right.
Congratulations to the joining the good side.
The southern pronunciation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he lots of good points.
Yeah.
I'm going to back him up on his Tom saving Miles' life because he's kind of backing me up on my time travel. So
okay. Oh boy.
Yeah, well, I think that'd be a great cliffhanger at the end of an episode where you see Tom actually save him, and then what happens? I mean, because that's huge. So,
well, sure.
I don't know.
What I mean, that's a great point. I mean, what and under when and under what circumstances will we next see Tom? Because I have to think it's going to be in the next episode. I don't think they'd go 2 episodes without having him in it. But it also might depend on where he pops up again. In other words, if he's going to pop up, my hand hit the wrong button. If he turns up in the Georgia Federation, let's say he turns up in Atlanta, well, good grief, he's up there in Philly, and he's a fugitive, so he's going to have to be extra careful on the way he travels, so it should take him a long time to get there, so we may not see him for a few episodes.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd be interested to see how quickly we do it. Like you said. You said something, and I totally lost. Oh, President's knowledge of Miles. Did he kill a kid or a family member or something? Kind of what I said earlier is I don't think that I think it's more like a love issue or something like that rather than he killed somebody, because if he killed somebody, she'd have killed him.
Yeah.
Unless she has an immense amount of forgiveness in this mad world that they're living in at the moment.
Well, Jashikan's in the chat. She mentions a good point that we didn't really bring up, but when she was talking to him, she put the knife to his crotch.
That's a good point.
So it probably was a scorned lover.
Yeah.
That's probably the thing that she did to him in the past.
Yeah, that's actually a great point.
Yeah.
So,
gosh, what else do we want to talk about on this one? Okay. Another instance here of what, well, not another instance if I word it that way. What did Miles do to Rachel? That was brought up again.
Yeah.
It's got more people thinking that it turns out that he is Charlie's father, that maybe there was a sexual relationship between those two as well. And I'm not going to say he raped her, because if he raped her, I don't think she would have been kissing him the way that she did in the last episode. But that there was probably, hey, he could have scorned her too, and Ben came along and said, I'll adopt you as my own children. And you know what I mean? There's speculation even more now.
So you're speculating that Ben knew.
Well, maybe not.
I mean,
depends
I
on
don't
how
know. There's
far
a
along
lot
she
there
was.
that,
Yeah. All I'm saying is that with there not being any clear answer to what Miles did to Rachel, it just gave more ammo to the people who are in the Miles equals Charlie's father camp. It just gave them more, conspiracy theory ammo, if you will.
So do you think Charlie will lose a hand when she finds out that Miles is her father? And maybe the nanites will heal it.
No!
Yeah. It's not true. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right,
Jim, thank you so much. Let's move on to Comey, who's in Savannah, Georgia, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Comey from Savannah. I like this episode. It was a decent episode. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. My major issue with the episode was how every other militia member that shows up and plays a prominent part in an episode seems to have some sort of backstory with Miles, which after a while it might start getting a little bit boring. But for now, I guess I can deal with it. I just hope that they would find a different angle on how to introduce these characters. With Georgia, it was nice to see a different culture. Nice to see that another society has found a different way to deal with the blackout, and it's just not all post-apocalyptic and doom and gloom, and we can revive as a civilization. It was just nice to see that they have found a way around the lack of electricity, and they seem to be thriving. At least that's the perception that I got from Miles' dialogue and just by looking at Atlanta. Which brings me with the steampunk stuff. With some of the criticism from the start of the show was that if the blackout happened, there was no electricity and people would automatically switch to steampunk. Well, I think we finally got to see that, at least in the Georgia Federation, that they do have steampunk technology and they have found a way around the blackout or the lack of electricity. However, I don't think that it would be logical if everyone in every single part of the United States of America had a uniform reaction to the blackout. I think it makes sense that in some areas you have people who have adapted well, in other areas you have people who have adapted moderately well, and in other areas you have people who have not adapted at all for whatever reason. Humanity reacts differently to situation, and not everyone reacts the same way. And the people in the Monroe Republic look like they're living off a subsistent level. And if you're living off a subsistent level, you would be hardest pressed to devote any extra time that you have towards producing technology and inventing new ways to live in a post-non-electric world. Whereas in the Georgia Federation, they seem to have a more laid-back government, a more egalitarian society, and the people probably have more of an opportunity to be more creative and more imaginative and able to invent new ideas and new ways to live in the post-electric world. Long story short, my point is that I like the fact that not every single part of the United States, not every single part of the world dealt with the blackout in the same way. It would be silly if everything was uniform, and I think it was silly for people to have those sort of criticism at the start of the series when it's a huge world that they're dealing with. It's a huge map that they're dealing with, and the people have to explore different areas of the globe and different areas of the North American continent. So I really liked it, and I'd like to see how the other regions in the North American continent are dealing with the blackout. All right, guys, from Georgia, take care, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.
All right, great feedback, Comey. And, you know, again, someone else breaking down the contrast between what we now have seen elsewhere in the country. And, you know, I love the way he articulated it. And I love that his argument about people were unfairly criticizing the show early on because, you know, you look at it and go, come on now, they should have steam power. They should be able to do this or the other. And now we see, well, yeah, when you're living in an oppressive government, you're not going to be able to develop these things. But when you are given the ability to flourish, then you are going to have these things. Look, we got a comment on one of our YouTube videos this week, our YouTube video for the pilot episode. We got the comment came in this week, so I don't know if they had just watched the pilot or if they just stumbled across the video and were complaining. But it was that gripe. It was like, how ridiculous is this that, you know, they don't even have steam power and some other things? And I commented back and I said, they're not going to address all of those things in the pilot episode of a show. Give it some time to answer. And I didn't want to spoil it that some of those had already been answered.
It out, yeah.
But, you know, that's the thing. I think the show received some early criticism. You know, it's not fair to criticize a show and assume that you know everything about the show and the environment day one, show one. Now we're seeing the world really come to life, and you know, these things do exist, but we understand why they didn't, you know, with what we were presented with in the first half of the season.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to the culture, and you see, because one makes one thrive and one makes the world look a lot darker.
Right.
And I like how he points that out again for us, and different adaptations to the blackout. And he talks about how we can't expect steam power to be everywhere, and I'm going to have to disagree a little bit with that, because we would assume if they're able to be in war together, they would be able to at least steal some of the ideas. I mean, Georgia and Monroe Republic, I don't think necessarily California would have that, and I like his hypothesis, for a lack of a better word, about how they react differently. I love that. But the fact that there is no steam, the fact that even Monroe doesn't have his own steam-powered Jeep, is a little upsetting. Just because you think they would procure some of that technology from being in a war. So,
but it sounds like he's not been very powerful. He talked about how Texas would whoop them, Georgia would whoop them.
He's a lot weaker than he really thinks he is.
And he's really been spending his time and resources on accumulating other things. You know, we saw him tearing down forests so that he could bring a Huey helicopter and store it. So if you've only got so much money and you're spending it on this, you can't be spending it on that.
Yeah. Well, they talk about money and they talk about Georgia being rich, but part of me just kind of wonders, it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with resources. I don't think the dollar bill, I'm pretty much absolutely certain that that's going to be worthless. It's a piece of paper. I
agree. When I say money, I mean...
I understand. It's a trade barter system,
right, exactly. Yeah, what holds value?
I think he would have more resources than that. Maybe they're too industrialized to really have too many resources in the North, but I don't know. I don't think he would be totally poor, and we see the mismanagement of him, and I like that, and I like seeing the faults that he has and how bad he really is with that. But
I think you make a fair point that you would think that after 15 years, at least Monroe himself would have some sort of steam operating vehicle.
It wouldn't take them 15 years to find a train.
Right.
So the last working train. Well, you've been in a war, you know steam exists in Georgia. It's unless everybody who saw that died, and I can't assume that's the case.
I can't either. Right.
I just find that a little interesting. But I can look past it, and I definitely love what Comey says about how we can't expect everybody to react the same, and just because he says that, it makes me want to know what the rest of them look like. How did Texas respond? Yeah. How did the Plains? How did California? How did Europe? I mean, the more we get into this, and I know Monroe I feel he's going to go because it's so much bigger than that, and there's got to be something else. And I'm really excited to see Europe and Australia, and maybe, I don't know if we're going to see those, but I'd really like to see other countries and how they reacted, because their cultures are completely different.
Right.
I mean, let's look at Europe. There's tons of countries over there and different cultures within a small amount of distance. Like in the United States, we have kind of a mutt philosophy. We're a mix of everything. Over there, they kind of are, but I think, from my understanding, there's still cultural pockets.
Sure.
Things handle things. So, I mean, how would the Swiss handle it? How would so there's a lot of hope, and his point that people react differently is brilliant. I love that. So
yeah, it's definitely good. Like I said, we got some great feedback this week. Thank you, Comey, for sending that in. Let's move on to another great one with Mark.
Hey there, revolutionaries. Mark from Ontario, Canada here. Here are my random thoughts regarding the night the lights went out in Georgia. NBC delivered another great episode. My only disappointment was that we didn't get to see Neville and Julia, but I know that will come soon enough. The only mention of them was at the beginning between Monroe and Tom's right-hand man. Did anyone else think red shirt when this conversation started? And I wish Aaron had a bigger part. However, the preview of next week's episode indicates that his turn is about to happen. There is yet another Star Wars reference in this episode when Miles says that 4 of our spies died to get us this information. Bothans, anyone? Did anyone else think that when Miles told Charlie to bat her eyelashes at the guards at the door, that it might be opened by a woman? Do you think Ben might have survived if he had been given his father's knife instead of Miles? What happened to the other 2 militia soldiers that were traveling with Alec to Georgia? I know they wanted to show the difference, but do clothes in Georgia somehow age differently than they do in the Monroe Republic? Everyone looked like they were freshly laundered, with the women wearing bright colored sundresses and the men in business suits. I just can't see how without power for 15 years that there can be such differences. I'm really curious as to how Miles and Sebastian know Kelly Foster, the president of Georgia, and what exactly did Miles do to her in the past? Who has the pendant from the bomb? We see Miles with it near the end, but does he hold on to it? We got new information regarding the nanites this episode. They obviously do a lot more than just replicate and absorb electricity. Jane used her little device to control the nanites in the 2 soldiers, causing them to burn up. She was able to control them in a very specific area without harming Rachel or Aaron. And about her device, what's powering it? Does she have her own pendant? And if so, why hasn't Randall sought her out? We also find out that the nanites are what are keeping Beth's cancer in remission and are what kept Danny alive, although we don't know from what. Do you think Beth has one of those little blue blinky capsules under her skin as well? Are they keeping anybody else alive? When the power gets turned on, will people be dropping dead all over the place? And finally, what is the big secret of what Miles did to Rachel? My vote still goes to getting her pregnant and leaving her. That's why you won't tell Charlie. Well, those are my random thoughts. But before I go, I wanted to mention that I placed an order on your Cafe Press store today. I ordered a black Fringe Division t-shirt. I know, the show's over, but it's never too late to join the Fringe team. And I also ordered a Revolution Power is Everything t-shirt. And I must say, the artwork on this Revolution Power is Everything t-shirt is amazingly well done. All you listeners out there, you really should visit thegoldenspiralmedia.com/support and click on their Cafe Press and order your own Revolution swag. You get to look cool while supporting the podcast. Well, that's it for me. Until next time, keep your candles burning. This is Mark from Ontario, Canada.
That's cool. Thank you, Mark.
All right.
I got to say, the person that designed that Power is Everything t-shirt or mug, we have it on, I don't know if I put it on a mug or not, but anyway, that design, that guy's a really talented, nice guy from Canada named Mark. So anyway, good stuff, Mark. And thanks for the support. We appreciate the support and we appreciate the plug. Where do we want to start with this one, Jeremy?
Well, red shirt, I called it, and
yep.
I think everybody probably did. My wife is still getting a little used to analyzing shows. She's not quite into it like I am. But I was like, he's gonna die. And
I was
he's
still
like,
doubting
bam.
it though. I mean, yes, I thought that. I did. But I thought, come on now, he can't kill everybody. He's just lost Tom. Here's another captain. He did.
So, I really like how dark Monroe is getting and how crazy he's going. He noticed the Bothan thing. Love that somebody else picked up on that. And I know, again, a lot of people probably did pick up on that. He talked about Charlie showing off her goods and opening the door, and if
you're not in the live show right now, go over to the video and watch what Jeremy just did when he said showing off her goods.
That's what she did in the show. So
your YouTube,
anywho,
our YouTube channel.
Just ignore Daryl. Dang it, dude. Anywho, so she's possibly opening the door for a woman, and I think that's a good point. But I think one thing that viewers, at least in the United States, are used to is, even though there has been a recent change to women in the military, men are military.
Right.
That's culture throughout hundreds of years for us, at least.
We haven't seen a lot of women. I mean, Nora obviously was.
Right.
I think we saw a couple of other in that episode, Soul Train, but we haven't seen a lot of women in the military here.
So,
but it reminds me of the movie Cannonball Run. These two girls ladies are driving a Lamborghini. They get pulled over by a highway patrol. So she unzips her jumpsuit a little bit and pushes her goods up, if you will. And then the cop comes to the window, and it's a female cop.
Yeah,
it's a great scene.
Yeah. So, Mark brings up how their clothes looked.
Uh-huh.
I think that kind of goes back to what we've been saying. They're not in a situation where they can't make new clothes. And
they're trading with other countries,
right.
too.
So they could have all of this material to make new clothing, to make suits. I mean, suits weren't invented in the 50s, as far as I know. They've been around. That's just a random year I picked that.
Yeah.
But they've been around for hundreds of years.
Right.
I mean, the styles have changed, but I mean, you look at least for us in the 1700s, they wore some style of suit.
Sure.
So,
I think it shows off the money that they had.
Right.
They can actually afford to spend
on
extra money
wool,
on
silk,
clothing. Yeah.
things like that.
Definitely.
So, and that's more or less the thing there that I would have to say on that.
Yeah, me too.
He brings up the one thing about Alec talking to telling Charlie, has he told you, or do you know what he did to your mom, whatever. And he hypothesizes that it's could be getting her pregnant and leaving, and I disagree with that completely, simply because this didn't happen 17 years ago, 16 years ago, or however old Charlie is. Alec didn't know Miles at that point. So Alec isn't that much older than
That's a good point.
Charlie. So that wouldn't be the issue that he's talking about, because he couldn't get her pregnant with Charlie and leave because, I mean, he didn't exist probably then. Or he was really young,
unless
so
they shared stories because they were
but
buddies or whatever.
I think it's something more recent that he did that Alec witnessed.
Observed, yeah.
Right.
I think it's a great point, Jeremy.
That's all I have
Gold
to
star
say.
for that. He wonders if Jane has a pendant. I think it's reasonable to assume that she does, but she might also have some other way, since she obviously has inside knowledge here. Perhaps she has another way to control things. But if she does have a pendant, he makes the great point that it's only a matter of time before Randall tracks her down.
Right. And we need to go back to that map of where those points were that we last saw. Maybe give us a hint as to where they're located. But I'd imagine she does have a pendant. I don't know if that's what's powering that device. It could be, but it could be a different device that's similar to a pendant.
Yeah.
It works in a different
exactly.
fashion.
It doesn't have a tracking device.
Right. But at the same time, I think maybe Randall hasn't approached Jane, Dr. Warren, because maybe she has the same capability as he does. We talk about what can he do to people that others can't do. He probably has a device similar to that, but at the same time, he might know she has a device like that.
Well, and she obviously has weaponized the nanites, so she may feel like, hey, let Randall come up.
Right.
All I got to do is push my little button here, and, he's getting hot under the collar.
Right. Well, the only thing about that is all he has to do is push a button called a trigger, and it works just the same. So, I think it's neat to see that she can boil people, but a bullet works just as well.
Yeah.
So, I kind of want to know if she has something else up her sleeve. This is a neat thing that shows us, oh yeah, she has force powers. She has this capability. But I think she's probably got something greater hidden.
Absolutely.
That we still don't know about.
Absolutely. All right, Mark, again, thank you for that. Good stuff. Let's get to the final feedback of the night, which comes in from Yogabon.
Hey, it's Bonita. I'm leaving feedback. I'm calling from the Georgia Federation, and I'm leaving feedback for Revolution. I've starting to really like this show. I like the sciencey stuff that we got tonight, so I like that we had our little fried, crispy guards there at the border in very crisp, clean clothes, so they got burned up pretty quickly. I also like that the nanites were something other than a weapon to begin with. They were conceived as something to help maybe cure cancer, is what they seem to be intimating in last night's episode. So I hope they stay with that. I'd love more of the sciencey stuff, being a Fringe fan. I come over from the Fringe podcast following you guys over here at Golden Spire Media. I love all that you're doing here, enjoying it all. And hope to see you guys again soon, maybe at Dragon Con here in Atlanta, deep in the Georgia Federation, that is. So hopefully you get through the gate. Just bring some wire cutters. I'm sure we'll invite you right on in. And the other thing I wanted to say was that when Miles had gotten hold of the walkie-talkie, I was really hoping he was going to shout something out to Monroe like, Alex, this is not here, or something like that. I thought that would have been pretty cool. Just wanted to give you guys a shout-out, say hey. I wish I could hang out with you guys while you are doing Feedback Podcast tonight, but I have to go to bed as I have early duty, patrol duty in the morning. This is Rebel Yogabon, deep in the French-tastic Georgia Federation. Peace out.
We had a lot of callers from Georgia, the Georgia Federation.
I've noticed that.
Yeah.
And we don't have any from the Texas area. Maybe we've scared them all off. I should apologize for all my Texas hatred.
Yeah, well, Mickey from Oklahoma City was in the chat room earlier. He's
okay, yeah.
technically in the Texas region like we are.
He's in Oklahoma, which...
In the Revolution world is part of Texas, sadly.
Well, yeah.
All right. Hey, Dragon Con is something that I'm hoping to go to this year. We'll see. I've never been to it, and my schedule, I have more flexibility since I'm leaving my day job and going to be freelancing, but I also have a lot of work there that requires my time now. So we'll see. I'm hoping to make it out there for Dragon Con. If I do, I'll bring my wire cutters with me so they'll let me in the gate. She wants to see more sciencey stuff out of the show, and I agree with her. I would love that, and I agree that what we learned this week with the nanites suddenly became a whole lot more plausible or whatever that we could get that stuff.
Right. Yeah. She talks about how they weren't designed to be a weapon to begin with, and how they may have been a cure or something like that. And we mentioned that before, but now that I think about it, I'm kind of wondering, wasn't the point that we already thought? I don't know if we were showed by the TV show or this is something we assumed ourselves, but wasn't the point cheap power, reproducible power? Is that was that just a guess on our part, or was that...
No, that's what they showed us.
Okay. So it's interesting that we find that it has the capability of doing this, but at the same time, their whole goal was reproduce power.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things they discovered about these nanites that were not intended. And I find it interesting that we're using zero of the possibilities that were intended.
That's because Randall is in control of it right now.
That's true. We need to take the tower. She talks about the radio miles.
That would have been fantastic.
I was actually hoping the opposite, that he would be smart enough not to let Monroe know that
he foiled the plan?
That it was Miles who foiled the plan.
Okay. All right.
That being said, I was really, 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 really frustrated with Monroe going, "Are you there? Copy. Are you there? Hello. Rip, come in. Blah blah blah." And it was
you
just
almost said Red Leader, didn't you?
Yeah. So it's just he didn't answer the first time. He didn't answer the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. Why do you keep going? It's like at some point you got to assume he's not there or he's dead. Especially if he already set the nuke off.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of thinking, he could have already did the job, and boom, here's your Oklahoma.
Now I think it was Mark brought up the point that where were the other guys that were with Alec?
Yeah.
It's a great question. We never saw them again. They should have been there helping him complete the mission.
Did we ever get a number of how many people were there?
I think we did at the very, very beginning. They said that Miles sent 2 or 3 guys, but I could be just imagining that. I'm not real confident in that.
You mean Monroe?
Yeah, I did, didn't I?
Now we're even.
Yeah, we are.
All right, so
we keep each other accountable.
Yeah. I'll have to pay attention to the number then. I must have missed
Jim's
it.
saying 3.
Well, see, 3 is what I had in my head, but
Me too.
I couldn't remember if that's something that I heard or just assumed.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
Yeah.
I'll have to double check on that. But
Man, what a great batch of contributions for this week's feedback podcast. You guys are amazing. You always bring up better stuff than we did. Thank you guys, everybody who sent in feedback this week. We really appreciate it. If you want to call in feedback to the Golden Spiral Media voice feedback line, which goes straight to voicemail, you can call anytime. That number is 304-837-2278. You can also send us in an audio file or type out an email and email that over to feedback@goldenspiralmedia.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/goldenspiralmedia or follow us on Twitter at GSM Podcasts. And that's great because on Tuesday afternoons, you can participate in our Rev Twit question. All right, so the question this week was, will Miles accept President Foster's offer? And if so, how will it impact Monroe? Got a lot of responses to this question this week. Foamy Once says, I sure hope so. If not for Miles' own sake, then for inspiring the rebels to keep up the good fight. Take down Monroe. Those Who Can says, of course he'll accept. Monroe will respond by shooting whoever is closest at the time, like always. Marksman Design says he'll reluctantly accept it, but it will start to change him. Charlie will get to see the darker side of her uncle. Or is it her dad? Dun, dun, dun. Anyway, Princess T. Taylor says Miles will accept. Rebels will be wary but succumb, and Monroe will shoot first and ask questions later. Dana Fringe says no. I think he'll come up with a better plan. If he does, it's just history repeating itself, and he doesn't want to be that man anymore. And then Dana replies and says, oh dear, I seem to be alone with my no answer. No, yeah, he'll accept. That's what I meant to say. We always say, get a theory and stick with it. We're going to hold you to your first one there.
even if it's time travel.
Jay Connell says, he will accept, but his heart isn't with the rebels' cause yet. Miles doesn't know what he wants. He's too conflicted. Tess says, I hope not, but he'll probably will. I fear he's losing his internal battle. For Monroe, it will probably be what pushes him over the edge. The Unibeefer says, I think he will only if she accepts some of his own conditions, but doesn't want to be the man, or he doesn't want to be the man he used to be. Rev Fan Podcast says, absolutely. Miles doesn't really have much else to work with. I don't think it'll be an easy war for either side. Lost Weather Guy says, yes, wants to atone for hurting people in the past by ending Monroe's regime. Impact dependent on Rachel's mission. Jim in Wisconsin says, he almost has to. It's his best chance to stop the militia. Monroe finally snaps and opens the door for Randall to take over. K.R. Mackins says, yes, the show is that predictable now. Alternicat says, yes, and when Foster's sudden but inevitable betrayal happens, nice, Miles' last word will be, crap. Yogabon says, I think Miles will accept but turn the gift of troops toward the rebel cause for his family's sake. Lynn says, I do. I think the end will be coming soon for Monroe. S3 Bastalker, that's Seabass Talker, I think is the threes or E's, says he will backstab every leader he joins. I like that one. And let me just make sure I haven't missed any here. All right, I've got one left here. Todd says he was a general once before, so it seems like an addiction to him to have people under his command. Then they would become rivals. So where do you fall down on this issue, Jeremy?
Well, I'm going to have to say no.
He's not? You're going to go with Dana?
I'm going to go with Dana. That being said, we had somebody mention that he would to atone himself, and I think he won't because he wants to atone for himself. So
I think he will, and he'll do it with the intent of trying to do it in a different way than he did last time. But he is definitely conflicted. He doesn't want to be the man he is, but I think he also feels like that's just who he is and can't help it. But I do think he's going to do it.
Yeah. Let me give you an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah, there you go.
I can't do a very good Godfather.
I think he'll do a good job with it. I think that they will be able to overcome Monroe with it. And that might be how the season ends, is a big showdown and Monroe is dead. Yeah. As you predicted all along.
I think that he might, I think he'll help the rebels, but I don't necessarily think he's wanting to be a general.
I don't think he is either, if he had his choice, but I think that's the best position he has.
Yeah.
I mean, he was already raising up a militia. He'd already reluctantly joined them and was trying to train them. Well, now he's got more at his disposal, so I think he will.
Well, and I guess these are offered to be a part of the rebellion. It's not necessarily, but it's not a whole lot of men to be a general of. I mean, we keep talking about being a general again, and that implies having a much larger army.
Yeah, he's only getting 100 at this point, plus what he already has with the militia.
Yeah.
Presumably.
So.
And somebody brought up a good point, too. Is the militia going to trust, not the militia, excuse me, the rebels, are they going to
trust Georgia?
Trust Georgia at this point?
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's right.
So
that's right. Interesting stuff. So great feedback for the Twitter responses this week. Thank you to everybody who sent in the response. Look for that on Tuesday afternoons and reply to the hashtag RevTwit to be included in the into this segment of the podcast. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up. We want to remind you that this is a listener-supported podcast, as it was Mark that mentioned it earlier. Go over to goldenspiralmedia.com/support. There you'll see all of our affiliate links, and you can also make a donation on that page to help support what we're doing here to help this podcast and all the other ones that we do as well. Thanks to all those who have made purchases through our Cafe Press store this week. We do appreciate that. Jeremy, anything else from you?
I'm good to go.
All right. I didn't come up with a unique sign-off for this podcast, so I guess I'll stick with the one I did last time, and that is, until next time, if you're going to handle radioactive materials, make sure your body is filled with cancer-eating nanites.
All right, and Barb from the Georgia Federation gave me mine. More than meets the eye.
The Revolution Podcast and Golden Spiral Media are not associated with Bad Robot Productions, Kripke Enterprises, Warner Brothers, or NBC. Golden Spiral Media's use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided within United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use. For advertising opportunities, live show, and other Golden Spiral Media podcast productions, visit goldenspiralmedia.com. Copyright 2012, Golden Spiral Media.